The Sound Off Podcast. The show about podcast and broadcast. Starts now.
So update me on the last time we spoke. It was May of 2023. And you had just sort of started a show called Let's Talk with Dani Stover. It was across a number of Corus radio stations. What was the show about, and how did it progress and evolve?
So the show was really kind of taking content from across the country. And that was like, I would get a bunch of emails in the morning. This was my favorite part of the day. I'd be like, oh, what are people talking about? I'd go through the emails, like rundowns from other shows. And I'd be like, oh, they're talking about self-checkout machines, and they're talking about a missing whale, and they're talking about some cool science thing. And I would take that audio, I would listen to it. I would usually condense it down from like 8 minutes to maybe 6 minutes, 4.5 minutes. I would cut out any, icky parts. And then if something was missed, or there was some additional context that was needed, or I had a fun story to get us into the actual interview, I would write that. I would research that. I would call it perform that. And then, we'd start to put together the show and piece it together like a puzzle. It wasn't live, but we worked throughout the day to package a 3-hour show. And so everything has to be to time. I would have a producer who would work on mini features to fit that in. And so the puzzle would come together every night for 7 to 10. And usually I was making like 6 or 7 brand new 8 to 11 minute segments per day, which I think is a lot.
That's a lot of audio.
Yeah.
Wait, what? It wasn't live?
Not live, no. Not live, and that's the way, I like it. I was terrified to be live. I didn't like the idea. And maybe this was coming from a more podcast background when I was doing Blog TO. I kind of liked the idea that I could be thoughtful and intentional and not be talking off the cuff. I think I'm good at that, but I felt like I owed it to my audience. And this is not saying about anything negative about people who go live. I have nothing but respect for those people. It's just not necessarily me in this world. So yeah, I think a lot of people were fooled. A lot of people thought I was live, but my show wasn't the kind where I'd open the phones. My show wasn't the kind where I was telling people to email me after. I'm like, it's 2024, 2023. People know where to find me if they want, and they did. But I wasn't like soliciting outside info. The show is, as it was very collaborative in the sense that I was using audio and you were hearing voices from all across the country. But it wasn't that kind of show. I wasn't like, what do you think about the prime minister stepping down? And then, some guy calling up with his 2 cents. That wasn't what I was going for. And that's not what I wanted to do.
Yeah. They're calling up with their 2 cents and then they offer like half a cent by the time they're done speaking.
Or like 8 cents. And you're like, what are you talking about?
So it's interesting that you backed off being live because you've done live radio. You did live radio, morning radio for a long time. You're used to doing live, but the minute you start to record things and then you start to make things better, it becomes a little bit addictive and we shy away from live. That's my experience. It's interesting to know that might be yours too. Yes.
That's a good point. I think it did. We did one live show and it was fun. But I spent the whole day prepping. Like, it was just not a sustainable thing for me. And also, the climate. I came in to 640 Toronto when we were very much in the depths of the pandemic. There was a lot of talk about vaccines and mandates. And I was kind of on the back end working for the Kelly Contreras show. And people were downright awful. And I didn't want to open myself up to that. I was like, great, you have your opinions, I have mine. Difference is I'm paid to share mine. And at the end of the day, the show was, for me, that sounds very selfish, but really, at the end of the day, I was the one putting the most work into it. I was the one who was having to listen to it and stand up behind it, say things with my full chest. And so I was like, I'm not opening myself up to that kind of criticism, really, or that kind of judgment, or I said what I said. You've got all kinds of opportunities to have your say or comment. I mean, radio has gone full, hey, text us. And I hate that. So really, it does get addicting when you are able to sit back. And I feel privileged that I had the time and space. I had the full day to sit at my desk and think and come back to stuff. If I was like, this isn't really fitting, I'm going to come back to it. And then later in the day, I'm like, aha, I have just the story for this, or I know just how to get into this, or I know just the question to ask, or the angle to take on this, or listening to audio, I'm like, that's really interesting. Let's explore that. And I think, having a bit of an improv background, I'm all about if this is true, what else is true? And finding the little interesting bits that I feel as a radio listener, I'm like, ooh, that's the thing. And I think with live radio, you don't often have that privilege to know what you're talking about before it goes on the air. And so I often said I had a crystal ball. I was able to say, you know what? You're going to hear this. And when you do, I'm going to invite you to think about it in this way. And the way the station worked was a lot of more right of center personalities and opinions. And then it comes to my show and I'm like, what if none of that's true? So it was kind of fun. I felt a little bit like a little shit disturber. I felt like I was able to be creative and cringy and do a lot of learning in the past couple of years. I feel very grateful for the space and time that I was given to talk about whatever the hell I wanted to.
It's an interesting time slot, too, because you get to the end of the day and most people are irritated with their day, with their lives, whatever it is. But talk a little bit about the climate. So did the climate get better, post-pandemic?
Yes, I would say it did. But still, there's this, and I don't want to speak like it's just a new thing because I feel like relatively new to talk radio. But to me, it kind of felt like there was this scarcity mindset of like, it was better before, it's worse now. I warned you, and it's only going to get more like difficult for you and your family and your friends and your loved ones. And I really didn't like that. That's not who I am. That's not how I want to live my life. And it's not really sustainable. So when I came in, I really wanted to set boundaries for myself. I was like, sure, if the only slot that's available is a 7 to 10, that's great, but I don't want to work evenings. And I think we maybe talked about this at the time I was working with Amanda Capito, and she was very good at listening, processing, throwing stuff back at me until we came to an agreement that was like, how about we try this? And that ended up being Let's Talk. So yeah, the climate, I think people had to get to know me and people had to get to know my style, which was very different. My opinions and my perspective on things, I think people did warm up to, for sure. I had a lot of lovely people that reached out to me saying, some of the best compliments I received were, if I tackled an issue that I was kind of nervous about, and people would be really responsive to that, or if I got vulnerable, people were responsive to that. A lot of people would say, oh, it sounds like I'm just listening in on a friend's conversation. And the slot, I was syndicated. So it was 7 to 10 Toronto, but it was like, overnights in Edmonton. And so I'd get people who are like, oh, I work the night shift and this is a great show for me to listen to. It's not like someone pointing down the barrel of the microphone or the camera saying, you should be afraid. It's like, you know what? At the end of the day, we're all just walking each other home. Like, let's not be so lax state. Let's, and I'm not like kumbaya.
Yeah, with a K, kumbaya.
Kumbaya. No, I say kumbaya. But it's,
because you're dealing with Goombas.
I mean, you're not wrong. But yeah, I think like people just had to get to know me. I think they say in, traditional radio, it takes 2 years to grow a show. I feel like I was just kind of getting to that point when the rug was pulled out. But that being said, I feel like people were mad when I took over for The Shift, which was a longtime show from Shane Hewitt. But people did warm up and people did come around to what I was doing and they got it. The people who got it loved it.
So I don't know who told you that it takes 2 years to build a show because it actually takes 3. But I think they probably tell you that so they can fire you after 2, which is kind of what happened here.
Yeah.
So do you feel the show was incomplete? There was another year in it.
Oh, absolutely. I would never have walked away from that show. I loved it so much. It was so hard. The building itself, inside the walls was getting really tough. Morale in the past year, bad. Yeah, so
It's not good when the radio company you work for is on the business pages for the wrong reason. That just spills everywhere. It happens with Odyssey in the States. It happens with Corus in Canada. It's tough. I get it.
yeah. So, a lot of people were leaving. A lot of people were laid off. They closed CHML, which was the Hamilton Talk radio station that was like, I don't know, almost 100 years old. And it really, I wouldn't have left, but it did start to feel like, what are we doing? Like, are we okay? When it happened, I was surprised, but not shocked. I thought I was safe because I was cheap and I covered a lot of airtime. But my views, maybe sometimes I describe my show as rubbing a cat the wrong way. That's kind of the way it felt sometimes, as though I was swimming upstream with some of my values and what I believed in and what I wanted to say, and then the rest of the station sort of saying the opposite, which was just the way it was. But I liked that part of it too, because I was like, I don't want to be in an echo chamber. I like the idea that 640 isn't necessarily in an echo chamber. I like the idea that we all have different views and experiences, and we're all part of different generations, and we can speak to the same topics. I thought that was an asset for the station, but, I'm not the boss, and I don't see the other side of it. So here I am.
You had an audio piece called The Woke Takeover of Remembrance Day, one of your final acts. Do you think was a tipping point?
Nah, I don't. It would be easy to say that was, and I had a few people reach out and they were like, do you really think this is what did it? I got called woke all the time. All the time. Like, it's just a word that everyone uses, and it's a word that carries a lot of meaning that I think has changed, and I think it's all too easy to use that word and kind of shut down a conversation. And so I think that week I was frustrated because of, what continues to go on in Gaza and Palestine. And I was like, here we are at another Remembrance Day, and I'm reflecting on what that means to me. And all I'm hearing is people complaining that this wasn't right or that wasn't right, and it's got too woke. And I'm like, I think you've lost the meaning here. And I got frustrated. So 4 days after Remembrance Day, I wrote a piece about it and I put it on the air. And then a big part of the job is also writing teases. And so I think my tease that day was just a little bit spicy, and it ran all day. It runs 3 times during Kelly's show. It runs 3 times during Oakley's show. And it was basically find a new word. And it was a bit jabby. But that everyone knew, everyone knew that was what I would do. So I don't think that's what it was. I think that's what they wanted me to do. But I just think that 640 is turning a bit of a different direction, has turned into a different direction. And I think at this point, they're just throwing things at the wall to see what sticks. And I mean, we're coming up to the first quarter meeting or announcement or something. And I don't know. I don't know how long Corus will last, to be quite honest with you.
Let me ask you, why do you hate the text line so much? Or text us, or just telling people to text us with their opinion.
On the talk side, people are mean. It just gives people a platform to spew all kinds of disgusting hate. And I really, no offense, don't think that the average person sitting in their car, this sounds bad, they're not an expert. Certainly I appreciate people calling in with their experiences and their takes on things. And we got some amazing calls and some really good texts. I don't want to hear anyone read texts anywhere. Imagine I sat here and I was like, hey, Matt, I'm just going to read you some texts. No one wants to hear that.
Yeah. And, so much of traditional media, whether it's, the CTV morning show or, it could be The View, it could be anything, even like CTV News. Why are you showing me what's on Twitter? If I want to know what's on Twitter, I'll go to Twitter, now called X. I don't need to get feedback you're basically turning your radio station into the comments section. And if you've seen the comments section of anything, it's not very good. So I'm not sure why you would tell your audience to go to pick up their phone unless they're listening to your station on the phone. It seems really dumb.
It's like, why are you paying people to be experts and professionals, and then you're just kind of going to, a really easy medium for people to just spew? And I love thoughtful radio. I love intentional radio. And so the idea of just opening up the phone lines, like if I hear like coming up next, we're opening up the phone lines, I'm gone. Unless I want to call in. Yeah. But the text line, I just feel it's a cesspool. For every one quality text you might get, there's hundreds of garbage texts, and people are mean and they're able to hide behind it. And I just don't like that. It just makes me feel ick.
Well, there should be an element on your show of signing your name to your work. And you've signed your name to your work. It's actually, your name is on the show. So I'm not sure why a listener or caller who contributes to the show doesn't have to do the same.
Yeah, it bothers me. And you said Twitter or X, and that is kind of what we've gotten to. Like, I remember when Twitter first started, and it was like, oh my gosh, like you've got access to people you might not have had access before. Everyone has an opinion and everybody's sharing it. But people are going to people, and there's some people who just want to watch the world burn, and there's some people that don't care that there's somebody else on the other side of it. And it's for me personally, not good for my mental health. I got into radio where I was like, it's you on the radio and maybe you'll bring in some guests or whatever, but the text line for me is just, if you're doing a contest, sure. If you're doing something where maybe you get a great text and you're like, can I call you back and let's do a phone segment, we'll record it, great. I don't think it's all bad. I think it's good that radio is using it, but I don't like the reliance on it. I don't like when I hear radio hosts who are vamping for times start reading text messages without having read them before.
Yeah, I just don't know who these people are, and I wouldn't even trust the source. And I just don't think it makes for great entertainment, and certainly doesn't contribute or forward the conversation, which for many radio stations is generally join the conversation. Well, the conversation is not good. Yeah. Anyhow, I do have.
Sometimes there's like a good perspective, something you might not have thought of before. But if that's the case, then I don't know. I just think that there's value in. I think there's such a rush to be first. There's such a rush to be. To break things or to be on top of a story before anyone else, that sometimes the quality lacks.
Yeah, you don't want to be first. You want to be right.
Yeah, honestly, a lot of times in my show, I would take a day. It's like, oh, today's the day that everyone's talking about this thing. Well, I'm going to talk about it tomorrow.
I thought the show, when you started it, was going to become a daily podcast as well, but I think you mentioned that it did not become a podcast in the end.
I don't have a lot of regrets about my career stuff. I do have one about not podcasting the show.
Was that your decision or was that internal?
We had talked a lot about doing it. It was kind of a lack of person power. Like, it was just a big job. And we were already doing big jobs, and it was just kind of hard to figure out who's doing what and when. And especially as people got laid off and left, the team just got smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. And so it was just like, there's just not enough people to help do this thing. Also, I kind of like the idea. Part of me liked the idea that it's just like, this is just ours now, and it only exists here. I think there's something kind of romantic about that. I'm just like, you're not going to hear this again. And I might be a little bit more candid or honest in this medium when I know it's not going to live forever somewhere on the internet. So there was something kind of magical about that too. And certainly because it wasn't a live show, we did repurpose a lot of the content. If I'm spending 40 minutes on one piece of audio that's going to play for 8 minutes, I might play that 3 or 4 times scattered throughout the week. So there was also that aspect to it where the show was a little bit repetitive. So yeah, I do wish that in retrospect, I do wish that we had podcasted it so that I have a bit of a body of work to be like, hey, look what I've done. I don't have that. It's sitting in a burly folder that I didn't have time to clear out because I didn't think I was going to be laid off. So I definitely, for that purpose, wish I had that. I feel like too, there might have been a bit more exposure. But I don't always know that I'm in it for exposure.
Were you more exhausted by the pettiness of people or Doug Ford?
Doug Ford. Actually, you know what? In all fairness, Doug Ford is great for talk radio. Anytime he would say anything, it's like I would scrap whatever I was doing and I would listen to those clips and I would have so much fun. And the best thing is I had a producer that left to go work for the conservative government. He said he met Doug Ford and he's like, oh, I used to work for Dani's show. And I think Doug Ford actually knew who I was. So that's very hilarious to me because I was always taking the piss.
But I think he just looks for things to get people talking about him. The idea of eliminating bike lanes in Toronto, that's crazy. And I think even he knows that's crazy.
Okay, so you were asking off the top, the 3 top. That story nearly broke my brain. Because as soon as I heard it, I was like, what are you talking about? This is the most insane thing I've ever heard in my life. And yet people were like, no, the bike lanes should come out. Let's rip them up. I'm like, the bike lanes are not traffic. You in your car are traffic. Construction is mostly it's what's holding up which is causing a lot of congestion. There's so much construction in Toronto. It's everywhere. I just didn't logically understand it. And anytime I talked to anybody, I was like, you're not making a good enough argument. Like I push back and I feel like I feel like this is insane. I don't know what Doug Ford believes. Honestly, I think that maybe he's trying to get his buddies some jobs after the Greenbelt scandal kind of dissipated. People lost some money and lost some gigs, and maybe he's trying to fill their pockets again. I don't know. I'm speculating.
I think that's good speculation. That's actually the thing that's kept Winnipeg in the dark ages, Edmonton too, for that matter, because when you run for municipal politics, you need to grease the unions. So if we can not have bike lanes, and we can keep cars on the road to wreck the roads, we can keep the construction people happy. If we can have greenbelt, suburban expansion, the home builders get rich. We have more fire departments. We have more police departments. You have to keep expanding outward. And every one of those unions who is going to back you and somehow get you elected is going to get paid in the end. And that, my friends, is why Winnipeg is a shithole. Oh. Hey, everyone, I'm right.
I've never been to Winnipeg, actually.
It's a suburban shitland. And by the way, if you think that it's rosy at its core at Portage in Maine, it is not. You will get stabbed.
Oh my God.
So it's the biggest. It's all suburbia. And the thing about suburbia in North America is a lot of people got paid for this. And what happened in Europe is they figured it out, right? So they're a little more organized in Europe. They've figured out how to really sort of create a little bit of everything, holding out city centers, getting rid of cars in the core. New York is now trying something that is involving congestion pricing for things. These are the cities that are moving ahead. Toronto's moving backwards and will reach Winnipeg status in about 5 years if they keep it up.
Well, and it's interesting going to cities that were developed and planned before the invention of the car. A lot of places in Europe are like that. And so, yeah, I feel like with the bike lane thing, people want variety. Bike lanes provide healthy options for getting around. I think in the long term, it will help healthcare. People will be healthier. They're maintaining a healthy lifestyle. And you go to a restaurant and you don't want to just eat one thing. And I think of the city of Toronto as a bit of a restaurant. You want options. People being able to bike, in the summer, I see a ton of people on the city bikes. I love that. I see people, entire families biking. I live on the Danforth where the bike lanes went in through COVID, whether you like that or not. They're the best. As a driver, as a pedestrian, as a cyclist, it's the best. It's like I don't worry about having to share a tiny little space with someone on two wheels. Also, when I'm on two wheels, I don't have to worry about getting doored. It's just better for everybody. And don't you want a city with robust, viable options? Robust? Perhaps not. I mean, this the transit system is a bit of a mess. I'm a big champion for Toronto. I love Toronto. I want to see it thrive, and I want other people to talk about how good it is. But there's an interesting dynamic with Doug Ford getting his little hands in the pot. And I think you nailed it with like the unions and, there's just so much bureaucracy and ego. And I don't always think it's for people are working for the betterment of the city and the people who live here.
Yeah, Winnipeg takes it to a new level, and that's with pedestrians. They don't clear sidewalks properly. And you look at the situation at Portage in Maine, they wouldn't let people cross the street there for over 40 years. And just now, they've looked at the price tag of keeping that intersection closed and have now changed their tune about it. There was even a referendum here about it. So when we talk
Why
about
was it closed?
Oh, I can't even get into it. They closed it because I don't know. But listen, does your city have two major highways meet at its biggest intersection? No. This is just the way Winnipeg was constructed, where the Trans-Canada Highway runs right through the center of downtown and meets another highway that runs north-south. And they just got to keep traffic moving, right? So people can leave the city as quickly as possible so they don't get stabbed.
Oh, no.
I'd be a huge hit on the radio here in Winnipeg, wouldn't I?
Well, you know what? We did do CJOB was one of the stations that I pulled from. And, it was interesting. There was a story about 7-Eleven. And I think Winnipeg is like the home of the Slurpee. Or
Slurpee capital of North America.
Yeah. But 7-Eleven was like, we need to get out of here. Like, we might pull our business because we're dealing with so much crime and nothing's being done. Like, we're losing, bizarre story. And I'm because I don't live there, that was also a little trick to the show. I'm like, okay, I don't know what it's like. I'm basing this off of what these people are telling me and what research I've done. But that was one story I remember where it was pretty bad.
Yeah, so Hal Anderson, I had lunch with him a few weeks ago, and he talked about contributing to your show a number of times, and probably that story as well. I think.
Did Hal like me?
Of course, Hal likes you. We all like you.
I don't know. I feel like maybe I did a segment that Hal didn't like because then he stopped talking to me, and I had to ask him for rundowns again. Anyway,
now Hal likes you.
I'm sure he doesn't think about me as much as I was like, I hope Hal likes me.
Well, you see, this is the thing when you work nights, right? You have lots of time to create conspiracy theories about yourself.
I
Right?
love a good conspiracy theory too. Yeah. I love all the space news that came out this year too. And now I'm thinking about what were the big stories I loved.
I look at 7-Eleven and Starbucks and some of these places that have pulled out of the center of towns in Winnipeg. Yes, crime. Yes, to that stuff. However, I think that it's just a little bit more lucrative for some of these businesses to be places where people can drive to them. So, and drive-throughs, I know for Starbucks are more lucrative than just a downtown street corner site.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big, I can tie this into conspiracy theories. One of the best performing podcasts that I did for Today in TO, which was my little side piece, was the 15-Minute City. And by far, it was the best performing episode. And it was because it made its rounds through the conspiracy community. And people think that the 15-Minute City is an infringement on your freedom to drive through a drive-through. And I live in a 15-minute city. If I wanted to go and get a phone case, work out, go grocery shopping, and pick up some sushi on the way home, it's all within 8 minutes. And I love that for me. I also drive, and that's a great freedom and privilege. I'm a big fan of people, and I think people are happier. Not all people, but when, again, I go back to the menu thing, when you have variety, when there are options for you. If you want to drive your car around, great. I love that for you. But yeah, I've lived in Toronto for so long, and I've lived in this particular area for so long that I feel like I go to my parents who live, where the closest grocery store is 45 minutes. And I'm like, how? I could never.
I'm glad you
It's
mentioned
nice
the
to visit, but
I'm glad you mentioned the 15-minute city, because there are signs when I, leave town talking about we don't want a 15-minute city here, which basically means you don't want to be able to walk to the grocery store. You don't want to be able to have like a restaurant nearby. I live inside Winnipeg, and not, in my home, it takes me 12 minutes to walk to the grocery store, and that's really all I have. That's it. I got a Safeway nearby, and the rest of it, I have to have a car. And I think that there's a lot of new Canadians who have come to Winnipeg. They've set up shop in, whether the north side or the south side. But I think the first reality when you get here is you need to buy a car if you're going to be able to do anything at all. And I think that's rather sad, a sad fact of everything. But here's one that I find laughable, is that most of the opponents of the 15-minute city are right-wing nuts. They're just out there. Listen, you can just be out there with your right-wing whatever. But I also thought that one of the parts of conservatism is less government, less money being taxed, keeping costs down. Well, that's what a 15-minute city does. Your city taxes are going to plummet and go down, as a result of this taking place in a place like Winnipeg. And if you want to go and have lots of space, move to the country, that's fine. You can go out there. But inside a city, you want to keep taxes down. This is the way to do it. And I don't understand why so many people who will vote conservative are kind of voting against one of their biggest principles.
Yeah, I've been thinking
You're
a
like
lot
me,
about
you got nothing.
Well, no, but I was just thinking a lot about something that came up for me when you were talking about that, is just the idea of like, what is a conservative? Like, what does that even represent anymore? Because some people, I've heard a lot of people who are like, I'm a fiscal conservative. And I'm like, well, you voted for Doug Ford. He's not fiscally conservative at all. So do you know what that means? We've got Pierre Poilievre stomping into town, and he's, all about traditional values as a conservative. And it's like, well, I heard Dr. Jen Gunter talking about this in a post I just saw on the internet. And she was saying, traditional values are a great catch-all. It's something that you wouldn't push back on. You don't like traditional values? How could you not? But traditional for who, for what? I think if you were to peel it back, and Jen Gunter's point, and I would agree, is that someone like Pierre Poilievre, who is a conservative, is probably pushing more for Christian values. So is that the kind of traditional values you want? I mean, for me, a woman, I don't know if I want Poilievre's traditional values. So the idea of being a conservative and what that means, and how that impacts who you vote for and what kind of ideologies you glom onto. I think a lot of people are just looking for a place to be and a community to be a part of, and they don't always dig deeper. And I think with the 15-minute city thing, it's like, what are you so afraid of? Choice? Options? What? Because to your point, Canada's a big place, and it is for now a free country. So if you want to move out to the boonies, go right ahead. You'll probably love that. But it's not for everybody. And if we want Canada to be a vibrant, diverse city, Toronto is an awesome place to live, but not everybody thinks so. And I don't know. I just think that I'm surprised. I'm shocked, because the 15-minute city has been around forever. And just recently, people have been like, hold on, I don't trust it. And I don't understand that.
So 1 year from now, Trudeau's going to be long gone. Likely Pierre Poilievre will be PM. And that contingent of the F Trudeau crowd, they'll have put away their flags. My question to you, Dani, who will they blame their shitty lives on in that moment?
I don't know, because you need a villain. And I think it's interesting that those who led throughout the pandemic either are long gone or have been blamed for everything. And, say what you will about Trudeau, during a time where a lot of people had no idea what was going on and there was a lot of fear, he stood outside of his house every day and spoke to the people of Canada. And I've been thinking a lot about this because I think the convoy had a lot to do with it. And I definitely, working for 640 at the time, heard a lot of perspectives on that side. And I can understand the people who were upset about the mandates for good reason, the people who had been working throughout the pandemic and putting their lives at risk on the front lines, who were no longer able to go home, were stuck across the border. I'm talking like truckers who the convoy was about in the first place. But I think it was co-opted. I know it was co-opted, and it was gross to me how it just became, we need someone to put in our crosshairs. We're frustrated and we don't know who that is. So fuck you. Like, I think I'm like, no one out. Like, we've had leadership before that's dropped the ball or hasn't, people, not everyone has liked. And I don't understand. The people are so angry that they're willing to spend money on a piece of fabric that says fuck Trudeau. It's like, it just
how's that helpful?
No, it hasn't been helpful at all. Like, I think it's, I don't even know what to say about it. I just think it's weird. But people were angry. So I don't think Poilievre is going to be this panacea. He's not going to be like, here he comes to save the day. I think things will remain similar and people will do backflips to say, oh, no, it's better now.
Yeah.
Like, I honestly think that will happen. Revisionist history.
I know there's people who are listening to this thinking, well, here's Matt and Dani having woke talk or left talk or liberal talk or something like that. I'm a conservative. I voted conservative all my life. And I just find, though, that the more puzzling questions about people sort of reside out on the right. What are you thinking? What are you doing? And they haven't been able to elect anybody in a while. And it's like, yeah, because it's your own doing. So you're actually driving a lot of conservatives to stay home, which is what's happened in the past. It won't be this time. However, if you want to know the answer to something, just look to yourselves. I just find that there's more questions to answer from people on the right than people on the left at this point. Because the people, some of the ideas that have been proposed, they're already in play. Some work, some don't work. The French expression is le plus ça change, le plus qui reste la même. The more things change, the more things stay the same, right?
Yeah. Yeah, honestly, I think, like, I'm not anti-government at all, but working at 640, I was like, how does this work? Like I wasn't always like big political person. I like issues and things like that, but I definitely learned a lot in the past couple of years about it. Yeah, it's interesting to see, what's going on in the States and how that's kind of reflective. I think basically the bottom line is greed. People are greedy, and that's a lot of people are like, don't look over here at the greed. Don't look over here at the, billionaires who got 500% richer throughout the 4 years where everyone was, losing their minds. Why don't we look at immigration? Why don't we look at drag queens? Why don't we look at, queer issues instead? Like, let's focus over here so that we don't look at the real problem, which is greed, a disproportionate amount of wealth, and the rich getting richer off the backs of the lower and middle class.
You talked a little bit earlier on about how you put your day together with the audio pieces and the stories and the notes. Did you use any AI tools to help bring that together?
No.
Good.
No.
I love a fast answer.
Yeah. That's the only one you'll get from me.
I love your Substack, by the way. You've written a few pieces. Are you going to write more?
Oh, yeah. I plan to write one today. I have a goal to finish something today. I love the writing piece of it. Honestly, with my show, Let's Talk, it was a lot of writing. I had stacks and stacks and stacks of burly scripts that was all just my writing for the radio. And so once I no longer had that outlet, I was like, I have to do this somehow. And Substack seems a nice place for me for now.
Were you always a good writer?
Yes. I think so. I started in writing. I did professional writing in university for a couple of years. I love grammar. I love to read. And it's 2025. I'm going to toot my own horn. I think I'm an excellent writer.
Do you think this will evolve into a podcast?
I think yes. I've had some conversations. A lot of people are like, when are you going to do another podcast? Even my mom is like, I love your Substack, but can you read it to me? So yes, I definitely think there will be a podcast in my future. What that will be about, I'm not quite sure yet.
You know that you can get some AI to actually read it back to your mom in your voice.
I don't know. I want to do that.
Okay.
Are you using AI? Like, I just feel weird about it.
Yeah, I am. Let me think how I'm doing that. Show notes. So this conversation we have is going to go into Otter, and it will come back as show notes and a transcription.
Oh, okay. Well, that's a great use of it. My husband the other day used it to come up with a budget for a project. So I do think that there's good uses, but I just get nervous about the people behind it who are pushing it, again, to take jobs from lower and middle class people to just get richer. But I do think it's a useful tool, for sure.
Yeah, I'm a little concerned right now about being on a platform like X, which I'm pretty sure most of my stuff is going in to be used for some form of AI and will probably be used for evil against me in the near future.
Perhaps. I mean, on LinkedIn, there is an opt-out. You can actually go into settings and say, I don't want my stuff used for AI purposes. I don't know about X. I don't really hang out there much anymore. People are mean.
No, actually, I felt I built this podcast through X and did a really good job. It was actually the number one place I'd go, but I don't think my audience is there anymore.
I go and I'm like, what is this? Like, people I don't even follow are popping up. It's usually people like criticizing my voice or something. And I'm just like, I can't. Blue Sky feels kind of empty. I'm kind of chilling from social media for a bit, and I quite like it.
The Blue Sky feels empty.
Oh God, is this a foreshadowing?
Some sort of sad love song or something.
Yeah, it's like, is anyone in here? No, it's just a bunch of cat pictures. My algorithm is bust.
Well, Dani, I love your work. I miss you on the radio. I hope you get back on one day, but if not, I hope there's a podcast I can listen to anytime, 24/7 when that becomes available on demand. And your Substack is certainly worth a subscription. We're going to put all that in the show notes of the episode, and look forward to hearing what you have to say and think in 2025.
Well, thank you for having me. Third time's a charm.
The Sound Off Podcast is written and hosted by Matt Kundle. Produced by Evan Serminski. Edited by Chloe Emo Lane. Social media by Aiden Glassy. Another great creation from the Sound Off Media Company. There's always more at soundoffpodcast.com.